Hello, Chrysophulture. Welcome back to the channel, old boy here. And today we're following on the thread of the Pelasgians. And I was looking at Robert Graves in his book, The Greek Myths, and how he writes about the Pelasgian creation story. Now, this seems to be something that he's pieced together and written in his own words based on what he's compiled from various different sources into what he calls the Pelasgian creation story. And what I thought would be an interesting thing to do is to have a look at the sources that he is talking about, to actually try and find the primary sources, because we know that's what's important. And I've tried to have a look at these primary sources. I've given a couple of translations, and then what I wanted to do is try and just follow that through and to find out how he actually links that to the Pelasgians, and basically that's what we're going to be doing. That's going to be the order of this evening's order. So let's get into it. So for those of you who don't know, this is Robert Graves. So, full disclosure, I've not read all of his work. I've not read a lot of his work. We've been on the spectrum. I retain information by listening to it better. So I have listened to The White Goddess on an audiobook format. I've had a look over some of the actual physical book as well. And what I can see is he does seem to be read with the Greek. He also uses the Greek as well. And just based off Wikipedia here, you can obviously see that he has also translated some Latin and Greek texts. Now, outside of that, I can't comment on how good his Greek and Latin is. I've not read any of his translations. I've not compared them. So just to get that out of the way to begin with, I can't comment on that specifically. But just to give you a brief idea of who he is, this is just his bio, just basic off Wikipedia. So it says he was born in 1895, was an English poet, soldier, historical novelist, and critic. It says as well that he was into Irish mythology and that he was a Celticist as well. It says that he's produced more than 140 works in his lifetime. His poems and translations, an innovative analysis of the Greek myths, and a memoir of his early life, including his role in World War I. And then it says his speculative study of poetic inspiration, The White Goddess, has never been out of print. And then this is the bit we just want to look at here. It says he earned his living from writing particularly popular historical novels such as I, Claudius, King Jesus, The Golden Fleece, and Count Belisarius. He also was a prominent translator of classical Latin and ancient Greek texts. His versions of 12 Caesars and the Golden Ass remain popular for their clarity and entertaining style. So he's clearly worked with the classics here. And as I've said, I've seen that reflected in some of his work, but I can't dive into, exactly how good he was at using the Greek. I mean, obviously he must be quite proficient to be able to produce translations. But what I'm trying to say is I've not gone in and analysed that. So, right, moving on. Let's have a look at this, the Pelasgian creation myth. So, as I said, he's pulled all this together, and the next slide we're going to look at is going to show the sources that is used to compile what he's calling the Pelasgian creation myth. So let's take a look at that now. And I just need to, 1 second. There we go. In the beginning, Eurynome, the goddess of all things, rose naked from chaos, but found nothing substantial for her feet to rest upon, and therefore divided the sea from the sky, dancing lonely upon its waves. She danced towards the south, and the wind set in motion behind her seemed something new and apart with which to begin a work of creation. Wheeling around, she caught hold of this north wind, rubbed it between her hands, and behold, the great serpent Ophion. Eurynome danced to warm herself wildly and more wildly until Ophion, grown lustful, coiled about those divine limbs and was moved to couple with her. Now the north wind, who is also called Boreas, fertilizes, which is why mares often turn their hind quarters to the wind and breed foals without the aid of a stallion. So Eurynome was likewise got with child. Next, she assumed the form of a dove, brooding on the waves, and in due process of time laid the universal egg. At her bidding, Ophion coiled 7 times about this egg, until it hatched and split in 2. Out tumbled all things that exist, her children, sun, moon, planets, stars, the earth with its mountains and rivers, its trees, herbs, and living creatures. Eurynome and Ophion made their home upon Mount Olympus, where he vexed her by claiming to be the author of the universe. Forthwith, she brushed his head with her heel, kicked out his teeth, and banished him to the dark caves below the earth. Next, the goddess created the 7 planetary powers, setting a Titaness and a Titan over each. Thea and Hyperion for the sun, Phoebe and Atlas for the moon, Dione and Creus for the planet Mars, Metis and Coeus for planet Mercury, Themis and Eurymedon for the planet Jupiter, Tethys and Oceanus for Venus, Rhea and Kronos for the planet Saturn. But the first man was Pelasgus, ancestor of the Pelasgians. He sprang from the soil of Arcadia, followed by certain others, whom he taught to make huts and feed upon acorns and sew pigskin tunics, such as poor folk still wear in Euboea and Phorcys. Okay, so there we go. So that's just an outline there of his Pelasgian creation myth. And basically you can see how it's referencing the Titans here. So he seems to be alluding to a form of worship. And this is kind of what I'm also getting and inferring from the texts as I am researching these Pelasgians, of an earlier form of worship associated with the Titans. Obviously, you have the Olympians versus Titans in the mythology. So this seems to be more related to the Titans prior to the Olympians there. And that's kind of what I'm inferring myself from looking at these texts. Okay, so next, let's have a look. Where is he getting this Pelasgian creation myth from? Because obviously it's written in his own words. He's compiled it. So here, let's take a look. So he says, only tantalizing fragments of this pre-Hellenic myth survive in Greek literature, the largest being Apollonius Rhodius's Argonautica and Tzetzes, but it is implicit in the Orphic mysteries and can be restored as above from the Berossian fragment and the Phoenician cosmogonies quoted by Philostratus and Damascius, from the Canaanitish elements in the Hebrew creation story, from Hyginus, from the Boeotian legends of the dragon's teeth, and from early ritual art. That all Pelasgians were born from Ophion is suggested by their common sacrifice, the Peloria. Ophion having been a pelor, or prodigious serpent. In this archaic religious system, there were as yet neither gods nor priests, but only a universal goddess and her priestess or priestesses, women being the dominant sex and man her frightened victim. Okay, so these are the sources. Now, I'm going to be looking at, I haven't been able to find all of them. This has taken a long time for me to try and find these sources. So I've got Apollonius Rhodius's Argonautica, found the fragments from Tzetzes as well. I've found the works from Damascius, and I've also got the story of the dragon's teeth, and also regarding the Peloria and the first man born from the earth, Pelasgus, as well. So we're going to be looking at all of those. I haven't been able to find the fragment that he's referring to. However, a lot of this seems to come from somebody called Pherecydes, who is writing, if memory serves, in the 5th century. He's sometimes quoted as being a teacher of Pythagoras as well. So let's take a look. So Pherecydes of Syros, 6th century BCE there. He's sometimes attested as one of the 7 sages, sometimes recorded as the teacher of Pythagoras, and he wrote a book on cosmogony known as the Pentamouchos or Heptamouchos. And some of the sources seem to travel around. Some sources say that he had access to some Phoenician books and that this is where he got a lot of this information. Now, does that necessarily mean this information was originally Phoenician? Well, as we've seen in some of the sources that I've showed when exploring these Pelasgians, even Cadmus, the letters are described as being Pelasgian in origin. So I'm getting a sense of this information might have had a common source that has then gone to multiple different groups of people. So that's kind of what I'm inferring. So let's have a look at these a bit more in detail. So this is, again, just basic information about Pherecydes. So it says, Pherecydes wrote a book on cosmogony known as the Pentamouchos or Heptamouchos. He was considered the first writer to communicate philosophical ideas in prose as opposed to verse. However, other than a few short fragments preserved in quotations from other ancient philosophers, and a long fragment discovered on an Egyptian papyrus, which I wasn't able to find, unfortunately, his work is lost. However, it survived into the Hellenistic period, and a significant amount of its contents can be conjectured indirectly through ancient testimonies. And this is just going to give you a general overall summary of what these fragments make up. So it says here, his cosmogony was derived from 3 divine principles: Zas, life; Chthoniae, earth; and Chronos, time. In his narrative, Chronos creates the classical elements and other gods in cavities within the earth. Later, Zas defeats the dragon Ophion in a battle for supremacy and throws him in Oceanus. Zas marries Chthoniae, who then becomes the recognizable earth, Ge. With forests and mountains, Chronos retires from the world as creator, and Zas succeeds him as ruler and assigns all beings their place. So that's just an overview. Pherecydes' cosmogony forms a bridge between the mythological thought of Hesiod and pre-Socratic Greek philosophy. Aristotle considered him one of the earliest thinkers to abandon traditional mythology in order to arrive at a systematic explanation of the world. Although Plutarch, as well as many other writers, still gave him a title as one of the first thinkers to introduce a doctrine of the transmigration of souls to the ancient Greek religion, which influenced the metempsychosis of Pythagoreanism and the Theogonies of Orphism. Various legends and miracles were ascribed to him, many of which tie him to the development of Pythagoreanism or Orphism. And you're certainly going to see some of this influence coming through, which you'll see in a minute when I read out some of these fragments, especially similar kind of concepts that you see in the theology of arithmetic regarding the monad, dyad, triad, and such like. And it's interesting that it's described as a bridge between Hesiod and these pre-Socratic Pythagoreans and such. So, with all that being said, let's now have a look at some of these fragments. So, I'm just going to bigger it on my screen. So the first one here is from Damascius, who's sometimes described as one of the last of the Athenian Neoplatonists. As you can see, writing around 400s, 500s AD. And here's one of the fragments that we get from Difficulties and Solutions of First Principles. So I've translated this as, on the one hand, Pherecydes the Syrian says the first 3 principles, including both time and earth, are always living. I say the one before the two, and the two after the one. But on the other hand, time makes from its own offspring fire and both spirit and water. I think the threefold nature of the intelligible, from which, having been divided in 5 depths, a great race of gods is established. The one called 5-soul, but equally in like manner, it is identical to say the 5-form. So, for those of you who are familiar with some of the Pythagorean works and the theology of arithmetic, you get a sense here of this division. So that the 2 after the 1 and the 3 after the 2. So that's very much in line with how, for example, the monad is described as splitting into the dyad and the triad and such. And then obviously you have the elements as well. And what's really interesting as well for me is how it says time makes this from its own offspring, almost like it is, well, it's almost reminiscent of how you hear about, let's say, certain things emanating or making emanations without a partner. And I've come across this in kind of like the works of Marcus Magus, for example, where you have this emanations by pairs. And there's always one that kind of creates these emanations without a pair. And I was kind of getting that kind of concept coming through here with it, time making these elements from its own offspring, almost, you know, from itself, kind of perpetuating. Next, we find a fragment in Diogenes, the Lives of the Philosophers. And here's what he's got to say. But the book of the Syrian, which he wrote, is preserved, the beginning of which says, Zas, Chronos, and Chthoniae always were. But Chthoni, her name became Ge, since Zaz gave to her the earth, which is a gift of honor, Geras. So, earth here, Ge. And I was wondering if there's a little bit of wordplay going on here with Geras, because we know the 8 is a lengthening of the epsilon there. And when we have a look on Perseus Tufts, you can see Geras. Now, I've put gift of honor, but I just wanted to show you here how it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So you can see here, look, it says gift of honor as the main meaning here on the LSJ. But look, it says the last honors of the dead, a privilege or prerogative conferred on kings or nobles. So it's not exactly just a gift of honor. There's more specific meanings here. And as you can see, it says generally a gift or present. So, okay. Especially prerequisite received by priests at sacrifices. So something given to the priests prior to the sacrifice there, or a reward, number 4. And what's interesting, it says, if akin to geron, which is the word for an old man, properly the privilege of age. So I just wanted to show you that because it's slightly more nuanced than how it may just come across in English translation there. But basically, I was wondering if there was a bit of wordplay going on with ge and geras. So that's why I included that. Clement of Alexandria is another fragment here from Stomata. And it says, Pherecydes the Syrian says, Zas made a big and beautiful mantle and fashioned into it the earth and ocean and the halls of ocean. And what's interesting about this is some translations, because the word here is organon, and some of the translations leave it as organon. But I've had a look, and that's actually seems to be another word for oceanos. And as you can see, organos here from the LSJ, as you can see, oceanos. And it says here, look, organ. Now, what's interesting about that, because this is Hesychius's lexicon at the bottom, he says organ means oceanos. Now, you'll notice that's very similar to ge. And what's interesting is some of these accounts say that the water and the earth were originally one and they're separated. So that's really interesting to me, how you have Ge, earth, and you have Orgain as another word for Oceanos. So that was interesting for me there, and I just thought I'd put that on screen because, so did they used to have, they've basically almost got here a very similar form for their names. So that was interesting, just something to note there. Next, we get a fragment from Eusebius, and he says, Pherecydes, also taking the foundations from the Phoenicians, theologized about the god Ophion, whom he calls fire, and about the Ophionidae, of whom we shall speak on another time. And the Ophionidae, they seem to be the descendants or offspring of Ophion. So that's interesting how it says that he calls it fire as well. You know, one of those primal elements. And that's going to make a little bit more sense as we progress. So I just wanted to show how there's some kind of similarity here with the Pythagoreans. Now, Pherecydes is, as I've said, in some sources say he was actually a teacher of Pythagoras. So possibly Pythagoras has expanded on these teachings, because we know Pythagoras also learned, you know, he traveled and learned under different people. So maybe he's built on top of it somewhat. So I just want to read a couple of these quotes out regarding the Pythagoreans, just to help you kind of see some of the similarities from the teachings of, or the fragments from Pherecydes. So, and this is from Diogenes Laertius, Lives of Eminent Philosophers. So Alexander, in his Successions of Philosophers, says that he found in the Pythagorean memoirs the following tenets as well. The principle of all things is the monad or unit. Arising from this monad, the undefined dyad or two serves as a material substratum to the monad, which is cause. From the monad and the undefined dyad springs numbers. From numbers, points. From points, lines. From lines, plane figures. From plane figures, solid figures. And then from these solid figures, sensible bodies, the elements of which are four: fire, water, earth, and air. These elements interchange and turn into one another completely, and combine to produce a universe animate, intelligent, spherical, with the earth at its centre, the earth itself too being spherical and inhabited round about. So here you can see this same concept of the two after the one, the three after the two, for example. You have the monad, then from that coming the dyad, etc. So I just wanted to highlight how you can see some of that creeping through into the Pythagoreans there. And this is from Hippolytus here as well, again on Pythagoras. And I just thought I'd read this out for the same reason. So, and as well, I want to just show how there's also a little bit of a potential direct link between the two. So I'm reading it out kind of to set the scene. So let's go. Pythagoras then declared the originating principle of the universe to be the unbegotten monad and the generated duad and the rest of the numbers. And he says that the monad is the father of the duad, and the duad the mother of all things that are begotten. The begotten one being mother of all things that are begotten. And Zaratas, the pupil of Pythagoras, was in the habit of denominating unity a father and duality a mother, for the duad has been generated from the monad according to Pythagoras. And the monad is male and primary, but the duad female and secondary. And from the duad again, as Pythagoras states, are generated the triad and the succeeding numbers up to 10. For Pythagoras is aware that this is the only perfect number, I mean the decad. For that 11 and 12 are an addition and repetition of the decad, not, however, that which is added constitutes the generation of another number. And all solid bodies he generates from incorporeal essences. For he asserts that an element and principle of both corporeal and incorporeal entities is the point which is indivisible. And from a point, he says, is generated a line, and from a line a surface, and a surface flowing out into height becomes, he says, a solid body. So it sounds like we're getting into the Platonic solids, the ideas that were later put into these solid shapes. Whence also the Pythagoreans have a certain object of adjuration, viz. The concord of the four elements, and they swear in these words: by him who has our head, Quaternion gives a front that has the roots of everlasting nature. Now, this is the bit I want you to pay attention to here. Now, this quaternion is the originating principle of natural and solid bodies, as the monad of intelligible ones, and that likewise the quaternion generates, he says, the perfect number, and in the case of intelligibles, the monad does the decad. They teach thus: if any beginning in the number says 1, then adds 2, then in like manner 3, these together will be 6, and to these add moreover 4, the entire sum in like manner will be 10. For 1, 2, 3, 4 become 10, the perfect number. So 1, add 2, add 3, add 4 equals 10. Thus he says the quaternion in every respect imitated the intelligible monad, which was able to generate a perfect number. Okay, so they're talking about this concept of all 1, 2, 3, and 4 adding up to 10. And it's almost like how they see 10 as looping back round to 1 in essence. And then you can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to that 10 in the forms of obviously 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, etc. So that goes deeper because now we're talking about the tetractys here. So this is the image of the tetractys, and as you can see, it represents the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4, as we've just discussed. And I just want to read out this quote from Number, the Language of Science by Tobias Danzig, and listen what he's got to say about the tetractys. Bless us, divine numbers, thou who generatest gods and men. O holy, holy tetractys, thou that contrast the root and the source of the eternally flowing creation. For the divine number begins with the profound, pure unity until it comes to the holy four. Then it begets the mother of all, the all-comprising, the all-bounding, the firstborn, the never-swerving, the never-tiring, holy 10, the key-holder of all. This is the prayer of the Pythagoreans, addressed to the tetractys, the holy fourfoldness, which was supposed to represent the four elements: fire, water, air, and earth. The holy 10 derives from the first four numbers by a union, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There is a quaint story that Pythagoras commanded a new disciple to count to 4. And then he says, quote, see what you thought to be 4 was really 10 and a complete triangle and our password, end quote. So what's interesting to me is it's almost like saying the 1, the monad, plus the 2, the dyad, plus the 3, the triad or trinity, plus the 4, which are the 4 elements, are what gives you this all-encompassing, all-bounding, this firstborn, this concept of the firstborn. So where have we heard this concept of the firstborn before? Where does this come from? Well, we're starting to, and I'm going to park the Pythagorean tangent here because I just wanted to show you the similarities, and also it served as a conduit onto what we're coming to next. But we're now starting to see and hear and maybe recognize some certain motifs which can be found in works such as the PGM and the Mithras liturgy. So what do I mean by that? Well, look at this here. This is Phanes, somebody who is mentioned in the Orphic Cosmogony. Now look at what he is also called, protogonos, or firstborn. Now, we've just heard from the tetractys there, the number 10 being referred to as the firstborn. So I'm just going to read out, this is just general off Wikipedia, just for anyone who doesn't know Phanes or has not heard of Phanes. So in Orphic cosmogony, Phanes, or protogonos, literally firstborn, is a primeval deity who was born from the cosmic egg at the beginning of creation. He's referred to by various names, including Erechapaios, power, or Herikapaios, which is, it doesn't say what that is there. Oh, no, it's just another spelling, I suppose, of power. And then we have Metis here, thought. In Orphic cosmogony, Phanes is often equated with Eros or Mithras, so the primordial Eros, if you want to Google that. Not necessarily the later images of Eros that you get, this primordial Eros, or Mithras, and has been depicted as a deity emerging from a cosmic egg intertwined with a serpent, and this is known as the Orphic egg. He has a helmet and had broad golden wings. The Orphic cosmogony is quite unlike the creation sagas offered by Homer or Hesiod. Scholars have suggested that Orphism is un-Greek, even Asiatic, in conception because of its inherent dualism. Chronos is said to have created the silver egg of the universe, out of which burst forth the firstborn deity Phanes, or Phanes Dionysus. Phanes was a male god in an original Orphic hymn. He is named as Lord Priapos, although others consider him androgynous. And then there was just a little excerpt here from the Dionysica by Nonus, which I just thought was interesting to put in there. In these are recorded in one group all the oracles which the prophetic hand of Phanes, firstborn, engraved as are ordained for the world. So I just wanted to show you an example there of Phanes being referred to as firstborn there. Now let's have a look at this image. Now this image is an artist's rendition of a carving. So you can see it's encompassed by the zodiac there, the wheel of the zodiac. And what doesn't quite come through on this drawing is, on the original, you can see half of an egg above his head and half of an egg beneath his feet, as though he's split out of this egg. He's obviously got goat legs there. He's got the serpent wrapped around him. He's holding, like the fire or the thunderbolt there in his hands. Also, you'll notice he's got the heads around his middle, such as Taurus, Leo. So they seem to be the four main points of the zodiac. And on the original carving, he also has the four winds around him as well. And you kind of get in this concept of, it's a symbol which, what's the word? Which encompasses everything that you can see in the material universe, whether that's the movement of the zodiac, whether it's the fixed points of the zodiac, whether it's the four winds, he's kind of like comprised of all these things. So let's move on to the next one. Now, interestingly enough, you have a similar concept with Aion, and there seem to be almost a duality, one representing the unseen, one representing the seen elements of the universe, both comprising everything. So let's just, as you can see, this is a mosaic here on the right. You can see is bound by the wheel of the zodiac once again. So let's just read out this again. This is from Wikipedia, just for those who don't know. Aion is a Hellenistic deity associated with time, the orb and circle encompassing the universe and the zodiac. The time which Aion represents is perpetual, unbound, ritual, and cyclic. The future is a returning version of the past, later called Ivum or Iwum. This kind of time contrasts with empirical, linear, progressive, and historical time that Chronos represented, which divides into past, present, and future. Aion is thus a god of the cyclic ages and the cycle of the year and the zodiac. In the latter part of the classical era, he became associated with mystery religions concerned with the afterlife, such as the mysteries of Cybele, the Dionysian mysteries, Orphic religion, and the Mithraic mysteries. In Latin, the concept of the deity may appear as eternitas, anna perenna, or saeculum. He is typically in the company of an earth or mother goddess, such as Tellus or Cybele, as on the Parabiago plate. And again, this is from Nonus and his Dionysica. And it says time here, but in the Greek, the word being used is Aion. So time is Corval, with his aged hands swaddled about the newborn girl's body, the robes of justice, prophet of things to come, because he would put off the burden of age like a snake, throwing off the rope-like slough of his feeble old scales and growing young again, bathed in the waves of law. So see how it's got this concept of secular time there, like how a snake throws off its old skin. And if anyone's seen a snake shed, when they're going to start shedding, the skin goes quite dull, starts looking like you can see the opaque layer. And then once they shed the skin, they'll look brand new, they're really shiny, the colours are really bright. And here they obviously recognise that concept of it growing young once again. And that's kind of like the cyclical time rather than linear. You know, if you imagine a point on a circle, the end point is also the start point of the next cycle. So that seems to be the idea, or partially the concept that's coming through here. And look, this is from the LSJ, Aion. So look, you can see lifetime or life, it says here. And look at the top there, properly Aion. So it had that digamma in it as well. And obviously, we know that digamma is putting this word right into the Mycenaean period, preserving that digamma there. And here it can also mean one's life, destiny, or lot, long space of time or age. But what I want you to look at here is look at number 4 at the bottom there. It says Pythagoreans or Pythagoras equals 10, and then it's quoting the Theology of Arithmetic. Now, I've not been able to find the Theology of Arithmetic in Greek, unfortunately. I'm still looking, so I've not been able to go in, find that exact quote where it's connecting Aion with the number 10, but it's apparently in there somewhere, and the LSJ is pointing us in that direction. So once again, if Aion is being considered the number 10 by the Pythagoreans, and the tetractys, this number 10 is also being called the firstborn. You can see that there's obviously some connection between Aion and Phanes, and I think it's a bit of a duality of the unseen and seen elements of that encompass the whole, everything. Okay, moving on. And I thought this was interesting again, because it kind of highlights the idea of the serpent shedding off its skin and becoming young again. So this is from Servius in a commentary on the Aeneid. According to the Egyptians, before the invention of the alphabet, the year was symbolized by a picture of a serpent biting its own tail because it recurs on itself. And again, I've just put that next to the picture of Aion there with the circle of the zodiac. And what's interesting about this is the deity Abrasax as well. So in Aesop Cephi, 7 letters in Abrasax, you know, 1 for each planetary power, 1 for each day of the week. And then the name in Aesop Cephi also adds up to 365 as well. So I'm wondering if it's a symbol that's been built on the Ouroboros as well, because they seem to be kind of depicting a similar concept. Okay. Now, we've had a look at the fragments. Now let's have a look at the other sources which Robert Graves said that he reconstructed this Pelasgian creation myth from. And one of them was this quote here from the Argonautica from Apollonius Rhodius. So I want you to pay attention here and think about Pherecydes and what he was saying. See if you can spot any similarities here. So here we go. Orpheus lifted his lyre in his left hand and made essay to sing. He sang how the earth, the heaven, and the sea once mingled together in one form. after deadly strife, were separated each from the other, and how the stars and the moon and the paths of the sun ever keep their fixed place in the sky, and how the mountains rose, and how the resounding rivers with their nymphs came into being, and all creeping things. And he sang of how first of all Ophion and Eurynome, daughter of Ocean, held the sway of snowy Olympus, and how through strength of arm one yielded his prerogative to Kronos and the other to Rhea, and how they fell into the waves of Ocean. But the other two, meanwhile, ruled over the blessed Titan gods, while Zeus, still a child, and with the thoughts of a child, dwelt in the Dictaean cave, and the earth-born Cyclopes had not yet armed him with the bolt, with thunder and lightning, for these things give renown to Zeus. And I've just put this quote here from Hesiod as well, showing how orgain means oceanos, and how the word for earth, ge, it's very similar. And I just put that there because it stood out to me when it says, he sang how the earth, the heaven and the sea once mingled together in one form. So I'm wondering why. I'm wondering if that's the reason why it says here, orgain, an old word for oceanos, is very similar in form to ge, as in the earth. So once more, I just thought that was an interesting point just to point out there. Okay, so we're getting mention here of Ophion. So I forgot to mention earlier, but Pherecydes is the oldest, is credited as being the oldest source which mentions Ophion. So it's interesting, you know, we're seeing that coming through here in the Argonautica. Next, we have mention of Ophion in the Dionysica as well by Nonus. So once again, let's have a look. Oh, and sorry, just going back to the previous slide, notice how it says here that how they fell into the waves of the ocean, but the other two meanwhile ruled over the blessed Titan gods. And this is while Zeus, still a child and with the thoughts of a child, dwelt in the Dictaean cave. So look, it's talking about these Titan gods, which seems to be prior to Zeus and his Olympians kind of, you know, usurping that position. And we're going to see a bit more of this in this next quote here by Nonus. So, not in vain, the following. Not in vain will he sacrifice so much to Zeus, the king of Ophion's thrones. For before these, Ophion and Eurynome, the daughter of Oceanus, ruled over the gods. Others say it refers to the ancient ones, whom they call the avenging Titans. Excuse me. I will stain with blood, I will dye, I will redden. Not in vain will you stain the sandals and the base of the altar with blood of the sacrifices, clearly of bulls and bovine victims, giving the most first fruits to Zeus the Lord, and king of Ophion's thrones. For before Kronos and Rhea, Ophion and Eurynome, the daughter of Oceanus, ruled over the gods, whom they call Titans. But Kronos overthrew Ophion, and Rhea overthrew Eurynome, casting them into Tartarus, and they ruled over the gods, whom Zeus again cast into Tartarus, and took the power which previously Kronos and Rhea held. And before then Ophion and Eurynome, hence he calls Zeus the lord of the kingdom of Ophion and Eurynome. So far, you know, we're getting, it seems to be matching up with what Robert Graves was discussing earlier about this earlier myth, these Titan gods and this earlier system that seemed to be in place. We still haven't been able to connect it directly to the Pelasgians yet, but we're going to continue on. But so far, the sources they're looking like they match up. I can kind of see where he's pulling this information from now. Now we're moving into, these are the Phoenician cosmogonies, which Robert Graves mentioned as well as containing some of these elements. And this image here, this is the image of Phanes, which I showed an artist's rendition of earlier. So I just want to highlight, look, you can see part of the egg above his head with the snake's head kind of just coming down. You can see stood on the other half of the egg there as well. You've got the four winds around the outside, and it's a very similar image to what you see as in some of the Mithraeums as well, where it's got the lion's head. It's all very similar stuff. Okay, so let's have a look at this Phoenician stuff then. And this is from Damascius again, First Principles. And here's what he has to say. The Sidonians, according to the same author, place time, chronos, before all, and longing and gloom. And when longing and gloom mix as two principles, then air and wind are born. Air they reveal as the unmixed principle of the intelligible, and wind as the living prototype of the intelligible that arises from it. And again, the egg from both of these arises as the intelligible intellect, I think. Apart from Eudemus, we find the mythology of the Phoenicians in Mochus, with ether as the first principle as well as air. These two principles from which is born Ulamus, the intelligible God itself, I think, who is the summit of the intelligible world, from which they say that Ouroboros, the opener, first came into being when Ulamos mated with itself. So here, look, we've got this this idea again here of one principle mating with itself, just how Chronos did in the fragments from Pherecydes, which is very interesting. And we have the concept of this egg again, which we saw relating to the Argonautica earlier as well. I've lost my place there, just 1 second. Okay. And the opener first came into being when Ulamos mated with itself, and then the egg, meaning by the latter the intelligible intellect, whereas by the opener, Ouroboros, is meant the intelligible power, since it first differentiated the undifferentiated nature. Unless, though, after the two principles, the summit of the one wind and the middle, the two winds, lips and notos, for they place them somehow before Ulanos, and Ulanos himself would be the intelligible intellect, and the opener, Ouroboros, is the first order after the intelligible, and the egg is heaven, for when Ouroboros splits in two, heaven and earth arise, each of them being halves of him. So that's interesting. So it's saying heaven and earth represented by the two portions of the egg there, and those two portions of the egg being Ouroboros. So I'm wondering if Ouroboros here is kind of playing that firstborn role, separated into two things here. So that's very interesting, actually. I'm kind of getting the kind of feeling that he's trying to make sense of it himself as well, somewhat here. I imagine people like this, they're going to be drawing from other sources and they're trying to piece everything together. So, but I just thought I would show it because we're obviously trying to find all of these sources that Graves is referencing. Now, we've looked at the fragments relating to what he calls this Pelasgian creation story, and I've just flashed up on screen a little excerpt here just to reacquaint yourselves with what he was stating earlier, because we're now trying to connect this to the Pelasgians. Well, not trying, but we're trying to see if there is actually a link there. I should rephrase that. So he said here that all Pelasgians were born from Ophion is suggested by their common sacrifice, the Peloria, Ophion having been a pelor or prodigious serpent. Now, I've not found, just to be upfront, I've not found a text which specifically calls Ophion a pelor. However, there are some linguistic links. There's not as much evidence as I would like. However, I do think there's still some merit having analysed the information. So let's take a look. Now, straight away, Ophion seems to contain the same linguistic elements as Ophis here, which, as you can see, it says serpent. It also says here in the Greek equivalent to drakon, which is a dragon. And it says again here, Roman numeral number 2, like dracon, or a serpent like bracelet. And then it says here as well, it can also be used as the word for a constellation, the constellation serpens here. Now, Pelor is a portent prodigy or monster. It says here, used in early writers, always of living beings, mostly in a bad sense, as of the Cyclops. It also says here of the serpent Python, which has associations with the Oracle of Delphi as well. So the word Pelor being used for Python here, okay, I can see it's got a connection to the serpent, and Ophion itself has a connection to a word which can mean serpent or dragon. However, there isn't a specific explicit link there. So let's just park that to one side. Let's see what else we've got. Okay. Now, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, we're going to explore the dragon's teeth here. So I've pulled a couple of extracts here which talk about the dragon's teeth. So the first one, Ovid's Metamorphoses. And essentially, Cadmus has just seen some of his comrades killed by this dragon, and he slays it with his spear. Son of Agenor, why art thou here standing by this carcass worm? For others shall behold thy body changed into a serpent. Terrified, amazed, he lost his colour and his self-control. His hair stood upright from the dreadful fright. But lo, the hero's watchful deity, Minerva, from the upper realms of air appeared before him. She commanded him to sow the dragon's teeth in mellowed soil, from which might spring another race of men. And he obeyed as he ploughed the land, took care to scatter in the furrowed soil the dragon's teeth, a seed to raise up man. And then from Euripides' Heracles, we also have a mention of these teeth which Cadmus used. What mortal have not heard of him, who shared a wife with Zeus? Amphitryon of Argos, whom on a day Alcaeus, son of Perseus, begat. Amphitryon, the father of Heracles. He it was dwelt here in Thebes, where from the sowing of the dragon's teeth grew up a crop of earth-born giants. For of these Ares saved a scanty band, and their children's children peopled the city of Cadmus. And if you look into the mythology, it seems like they helped construct Thebes. But I just want you to notice here, notice how they're called earthborn, and they're called giants, and they're springing up from the earth. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. Finally, last excerpt about the dragon's teeth. This is from Apollodorus. When Telephassa died, Cadmus buried her, and after being hospitably received by the Thracians, he came to Delphi to inquire about Europa. The god told him not to trouble about Europa, but to be guided by a cow, and to found a city wherever she should fall down for weariness. After receiving such an oracle, he journeyed through Phorcys, when falling in with a cow among the herds of Pelasgian. So Pelasgian, I just want you to bear that name in mind. And he followed it behind. And after traversing Boeotia, it sank down where is now the city of Thebes. Wishing to sacrifice the cow to Athena, he sent some of his companions to draw water from the spring of Ares. But a dragon, which some said was the offspring of Ares, guarded the spring and destroyed most of those that were sent. In his indignation, Cadmus killed the dragon, and by the advice of Athena sowed its teeth. When they were sown, they arose from the ground, armed men, whom they call Sparti. These slew each other, some in a chance brawl, some in ignorance. But Pherecydes says that when Cadmus saw armed men growing out of the ground, he flung stones at them, and they, supposing that they were being pelted by each other, came to blows. However, 5 of them survived: Aion, Udius, Chthonius, Hupenor, and Pelorus. Okay, now, what's interesting here, notice how it says this dragon was guarding a spring. I just want you to bear that in mind, because springs and these water nymphs and stuff, they're going to play a role in a wee while. We also have mention of these men growing from the ground being called Sparti, and 5 of them surviving. So Aion, his name seems to be a derivation of Echis, which is to do with a snake, echidna, for example. Chthonius there, from Chthon, it's got the same root as the earth there. And Pelorus here seems to have a similar root to Pelor, which Robert Graves was discussing earlier, which is interesting. And one of these 5 as well is also an ancestor of Tiresias, the blind seer, who's transformed into a snake. Or rather, he sees snakes mating, and he's transformed from a man into a woman, and then later back again. So these 5, you know, being the ancestor there, I'm wondering if this is an analogy here being used, a metaphor. We know that the Greek texts like to use them. And I also want to point out Pherecydes is mentioned here again. So as I said earlier, he seemed to have access from some of these what are called Phoenician books. And it's just interesting how that crops up here with this story regarding Cadmus. So I just thought that was worth pointing out as well. Now let's unpack some of this a little bit more. So Spartoi, Spartos. Now, interesting, this word comes from speiro, which is a verb, which means, you know, to scatter wide and far. And it's used for, you know, scattering seed in a field, for example. Now look what it means: Spartos, grown from seed, cultivated, or 2 of men. And look, so see how it gives you an example here. Oi Spartoi tekai autochthones. So that means Spartoi and both autochthones. And I've just pointed this out at the bottom. Look what that means. Thorn meaning the earth, auto meaning self, so therefore sprung from the land itself. Those who are literally, they didn't move there, they were born there as though they were sprung from the earth. And as you can see here, look, not settlers, of native stock. Adjective, indigenous, native. And going back up to Spartos here, look, especially at Thebes, Spartoi, the sown men, those who sprang from the dragon's teeth, sown by Cadmus and their descendants. So he's going out, planting these dragon's teeth, which become known as those that are grown from seed, cultivated, sprung from the earth itself. So is he going out planting some kind of colony? Is he establishing some kind of... What's he doing here? Is he coming into contact with people who are natives there, or is he a native from the land himself? But I think this is where the giants and sprung from the earth, I think this is what it's meaning. It's a metaphor, an analogy for people who were born here, as opposed to maybe groups of people who carried the Proto-Indo-European language, who maybe had a sky father, Zeus, which then came and supplanted these older ways. So anyways, let's move on from that. I think I've hammered that point. So Pelagon here, the name of one of these people who grew out of the dragon teeth. Now I just want to point this. Oh, sorry, no, this is Pelagon. This is the person who had the cow. Now look at this. There's several figures named Pelagon. King of Phorcys, who we just mentioned. He gave Cadmus the cow, which guided him to Boeotia. But then look at this, Pelagon, also called Pelasgus. Now, this is the Pelasgus who is apparently the eponymous ancestor of the Pelasgians. He is, some sources described as the first person sprung up from the earth itself. Again, so it's interesting to me how this Pelagon, Pelasgus here, and notice how it says son of a river god by the naiad Metope, daughter of the river Ladon. So again, all this river, this sea, this water stuff. And as we've seen from Turanians and Tersanians, sometimes that sigma can drop out. So I'm wondering if Pelagon and Pelasgon, for example, I wonder if they're deriving from the same place. And just bear in mind here, as I said, this connection here with the river gods and these water nymphs, for example. But I just wanted to point that out there because we're getting a same name at least to Pelasgus. We haven't got an explicit link, but we've certainly got something going on linguistically here. I'm sure they're different characters. I'm not saying they're the same person, but it's interesting how we're getting a similar linguistic root in the name here. Now, Pelagos. Now, that's making me wonder if there's some connection to the word Pelagos. Because if I just go back, as I said, Pelagon and Pelasgus, I'm wondering if there's a connection here, because there seem to be a lot of connections to water. And as you can see, Pelagos here, open sea. The parts of the sea, it says a flooded plain. And then this, the top's the LSJ, and the second is the, sorry, I can't remember the actual name of it, but it's the other option that you can pick on Perseus Tufts. And I just want to show you here, look, the sea, especially the high sea, Latin Pelagus. So look, you can see the endings. The us ending there is similar to Pelasgus. It's just got that sigma missing. And as I said, that sigma, certainly in Turanian and Tersanian, sometimes drops out. So I just thought that was an interesting observation. I just wanted to point out, because this connection to being, you know, descended from gods of rivers and such seems very prominent. Now, Pelorus, this is the other name. This is the name of one of the Spartoi that grew from the dragon's teeth. And look, it says here, may refer to several distinct characters. And look, Pelorus, also called Pelorius, one of the giants, and we're going to look at giants in a moment. Or Pelorus, also Pelor. Now, this is the word that Robert Graves was referencing here. One of the Spartoi, or men that grew forth from the dragon's teeth, which Cadmus sowed at Thebes. The other four surviving being, you know, as we've already mentioned. And then we have this festival, Pelorus, the man whom the festival of Peloria was named after. He brought news of the violent earthquakes in Haemonia, where the former country covered by the lake became visible plains as the water drained off. Pelasgus, delighted with his statement, held a bountiful banquet for him worthy of an honourable guest, and Pelorus was similarly served cordially by the other nobles. So look, it seems very similar to Saturnalia here, with that switching of the poles there, I guess, where the nobles are becoming servants and the servants are becoming treated as nobles. Afterwards, the Pelasgians occupied the newly revealed district, and they instituted a festival, Peloria, as a sort of imitation to the feast which took place on that occasion, and sacrificed to a specific Zeus Pelor, so a Zeus with that epithet. And this is from a dictionary of Greek and Roman antiquities, just giving a general idea of what the Peloria is. A festival celebrated by the Thessalians, which is compared to the Roman Saturnalia. Its origin was traced to the ancient Pelasgian times. Sacrifices were offered to Zeus Pelorius, and to the splendid banquets any strangers were admitted. Prisoners were set free, slaves enjoyed the greatest liberty, and were even waited upon by their masters. So this is interesting, because if you've been following along with the Pelasgian videos, some sources say that they actually, the origin of the Saturnalia and the Lupercalia can be attributed to the Pelasgians, as well as the Samothracian mysteries. So that's super interesting now that we have another festival here, the Peloria, which is similar to the Saturnalia here as well. Okay. Now, this is the source which mentions the Peloria festival, and it's from Athenaeus in Deipnos Sophists. So let's check that out now. But Baton of Sinope, the orator, in his treatise on Thessaly and Haemonica, distinctly asserts that the Roman Saturnalia are originally a very Greek festival. And when it says Greek, think Pelasgian. Saying that among the Thessalians, it is called Peloria. And as we've seen, Thessaly seems to be a key region here for the Pelasgians. And these are his words, quote, "When a common festival was being celebrated by all the Pelasgi, a man whose name was Pelorus brought news to Pelasgus that there had been some violent earthquakes in Haemonia, by which the mountains called Tempe had been rent asunder, and that the water of the lake had burst through the rent and was all falling into the stream of the Peneus, and that all the country, which had formerly been covered by the lake, was now laid open, and that as the waters were now drained off, there were plains visible of wondrous size and beauty. Accordingly, Pelasgus, on hearing this statement, had a table loaded with every delicacy set before Pelorus, and every one else received him with great cordiality, and brought whatever they had that was best, and placed it on the table before him, the man who had brought this news. And Pelasgus himself waited on him with great cheerfulness, and all the rest of the nobles obeyed him as his servants as often as any opportunity offered. On which account they say that after the Pelasgi occupied the district, they instituted a festival as a sort of imitation of the feast which took place on that occasion. And sacrificing to Zeus Pelor, they served up tables admirably furnished, and hold a very cordial and friendly assembly, so as to receive every foreigner at the banquet, and to set free all the prisoners, and to make their servants sit down and feast with every sort of liberty and license, while their masters wait on them. And in short, even to this day, the Thessalians celebrate this as their chief festival and call it Peloria." So there you go. That's the source which speaks about this Peloria, and we certainly have a connection to somebody called Pelorus and Pelasgus here now as well. It's maybe not as explicit as we like for connecting these creation myths specifically to the Pelasgians, but we're going to keep going. And actually, it's making me think of the hat now, the Peleus as well, the Peleus. I wonder if I'll have to look into that as well down the line. Now, from Aeschylus here in Suppliant Maidens, here is the origin of Pelasgus here. I'm just going to read it out because I just want to show how he's almost depicted as kind of like a primordial man, or one of the first rulers, certainly. It varies between some of the accounts. So this is from Aeschylus here. "For I am Pelasgus, offspring of Palaikathon, whom the earth brought forth, and lord of this land, and after me their king is rightly named the race of the Pelasgi, who harvest the land." And notice the connection here to water, how the boundaries are marked out by the water here. "Of all the region through which the pure Strumon flows, on the side towards the setting sun, I am the lord. There lies within the limits of my rule the land of the Paribi, the parts beyond Pindus, close to the Paeonians, and the mountain ridge of Dodona. The edge of the watery sea borders my kingdom. I rule up to these boundaries." And I just want to point out here, this Palaikathon here, look, so it seems to be from the word Palaios, which means long ago or old, ancient, and Chthon, as we've mentioned before, the earth. So together, Palaikathon, that which has been long in a country, an ancient inhabitant or indigenous. So again, it goes back to this, a native. He's not travelled here. He's ancient. Either, his lineage goes back to people who've lived here for forever, as far as time immemorial, as though they sprang from the earth itself. So I'm just trying to hit home this kind of identity, or this language that they're using to describe these people. Now, next, Pausanias' descriptions of Greece, again, this just goes on to Pelasgus, and it kind of metaphorical for him being, you know, one of the first inhabitants of the land. You know, he was probably just potentially one of the first rulers, and that's why the Pelasgians took his name. So here, the Arcadians say that Pelasgus was the first inhabitant of this land. It is natural to suppose that others accompanied Pelasgus, and that he was not by himself, for otherwise he would have been a king without any subjects to rule over. True. However, in stature and in prowess, in beauty and in wisdom, Pelasgus excelled his fellows, and for this reason I think he was chosen to be king by them. Arceus the poet says of him, the godlike Pelasgus of the wooded mountains black earth gave up, that the race of mortals might exist. So Pelasgus, who, you know, came out of this the black earth itself. And I just want to show you the Greek text here, because the word being used there is Gaia meline. You know, meline as in melanin, black, and Gaia as in the earth. So again, sprung from the black earth itself. So we're definitely getting this concept of people who are born from the earth. You know, not literally like these huge 55 feet giants or whatever, you know, smashing out of the earth. No, giant in a sense of, you know, people of renown, and they were indigenous inhabitants of the land, essentially. And here, look, gigas, mostly in plural, giants. And look, it says as an adjective, mighty. And then again, this is in the, I'm going to have to get the name of it. So the top one's the LSJ. I can't remember if it's the Lewis and Short or if it's the other one, but I just thought it was interesting because it noted, look, the sons of Gaia, sons of the earth. So as though the earth bore them herself. So that's kind of the analogy, the metaphor I'm getting from this. Giants, as in they were mighty people born from the earth themselves. So that's going to come to the end of the presentation. Do we have enough evidence to support Robert Graves' Pelasgian creation myth? Well, I definitely agree that you have these archaic sort of elements coming through from the pieces from Pherecydes, from these older Phoenician cosmogonies, elements that are found in the Orphic literature as well. I can certainly see that coming through. Is there an explicit connection to the Pelasgians as such? I don't think there's an explicit connection. Again, as I've said earlier, I've not read through all of Robert Graves' work. Maybe he has some more information that I've not seen, and I'll come on to in the future. And if I do spot it, I'll obviously mention it. But while we don't have an explicit connection, I do think there's something going on linguistically here. You know, especially this connection between Pelasgus and Peloris and the Peloria festival, and one of the people who sprung forth from the dragon's teeth having, you know, a similar name as well, and even Pelasgus having this other alternate name, all of which seem to have a similar linguistic root. So it's hard to say, but I do think there's some linguistic connection there. I wouldn't like to go boom. Yeah, we can definitely, with utmost certainty, connect this to the Pelasgians, but I do think there's something going on. And from the information I've been gleaming when I've been researching them and putting together the sources and the videos, I'm also kind of getting this idea as well. This is what I'm inferring from the text myself. I just don't want to specifically, definitively go out there and say, yes, 100% we can connect it. I'm going to have to go and have a look at some more of Robert Graves' info, to see if I can find anything else. And maybe in some of the fragments I couldn't find, maybe that information's there. Who knows? But it was certainly worthwhile pursuing as an exercise, looking at these sources, looking at this earlier kind of cosmogony and this Titan system as opposed to the Olympian. Next, I'm going to be looking at the Larissa connection, because there seem to be a lot of places called Larissa which seem to have a connection to the Pelasgians. It may have been a name for a Pelasgian fortification. So, and she was also a nymph and daughter. It was the name of the daughter of Pelasgian as well. So there's certainly something going on here. So the next video, I'm going to be diving back into the mythology, and I'm going to present some of this information about Larissa, and we're going to see what we can come up with. So that finishes our presentation for today. I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who's joined tonight. Big shout out to Drawing Down the Stars here as well, Snappy. Thank you so much for joining. I'm just having a scroll through here. Lewis, thank you very much for joining as well. Tea with Lilith, thank you. Great to see Tammy in the chat as well. Thanks so much. Yes, fantastic. Just seeing if there's any specific questions there. Okay, I just want to say thank you everyone for giving me an hour or so of your time. We've probably gone over here, an hour 15. Thanks so much for the support. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments as well afterwards, what you think about this Pelasgian creation myth with Robert Graves, because I'll be interested to know. And yeah, hopefully we can crack this, crack some more information together. So thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace out, everyone. Thanks for the support.